It's really wild, the memories that are already included in Arabella. It's been a long, slow process, but doing it with the small crew, having just a handful of people come in and out from time to time and help, it's really made it so that there's virtually nothing that just got done. Like there wasn't a crew that was building something, and from my perspective, it was like, oh wow, that just went in. With having the small crew and just a handful of people here and there from time to time, I've gotten to really work with everyone that's come and be a part of essentially every single process of building this boat, which was a huge part of the goal of doing it. So sometimes it's nice to come here in the morning and just sit, even though it's cold, and just remember a bit. And I can't wait to be on the water and do that. Like I look at the clamp and the shelf and think about doing that with Bob Emster from R&W Boatbuilding, and the tie rods and learning how to weld bronze. There's a pair of rivets over there in the corner of the bench that are almost touching, where a volunteer who shall remain nameless was learning to drill through when we were hanging planks, and they came basically almost met, which is not ideal, but it'll be fine. And it's a great memory building the drawers and the workbench with Wes, getting donated this amazing Emirates vise, building this bunk and laying all that out with Carolyn. There's so much, and really thankful for all of the help that we've gotten and continue to get. So thank you so much to everyone who came out and everyone who's come and volunteered and will come and volunteer. And it's been a pleasure working with everyone and getting this boat built. I can't wait to see her on the water. Yeah, you like the anchor locker? I think it'll work.
I seen it the other day when I was in here.
The pan for the sole's going in today. In the head.
Oh, yeah.
Aha. That is good.
It's not ready to install permanently yet, but the last step for the shower pan for now is to get it level to the sole beams. And David came by to help with that. The last time he and his son Grant were here, they were helping get the housetop started.
And I was able to get the supports in place so that when you do fix this permanently, you can adjust them as needed. Now, each one's a different size, different taper, different everything, because it's the damn boat. But I've numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3. Reference lines here and here, so that when you line them up, you can figure out where they go. I left the back a little long so you can figure out how you want to taper them, but it should be relatively finished.
Beautiful, thank you.
No problem. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, it was good to see you. It's been a while since you've been in the shop.
Yeah, and there's so many changes. It's really impressive what's been happening. Cool.
Thank you.
You probably noticed over the past few rainy episodes that the plastic sides of the boathouse are pretty ripped up and needed replacing. So Anne put out a call for volunteers to get that and a couple other projects done.
There are 3 projects that I would love to work on today. One, probably the simplest one, is going through the downstairs of the boathouse and just starting to rake up all of the massive amounts of sawdust that we've created and redistribute it out here onto the sawdust in the yard. It's getting pretty deep in there. So if there's a couple people who want to work on that. The most involved project will be replasticking the boathouse, and that I would say that 3 to 4 people will probably be ideal for. So the first thing will be going around on ladders and taking down all of the plastic and loosening up the roof that goes over the top. Once it's all down, we can roll out the new sheets and put it on. So if you're going to be on that crew, it's going to be real nice if you're comfortable up on the extension ladders. And you're going to be taking the sheets of plastic and putting these batten strips on them, and then rolling that, standing on the ladder, pulling that tight, and using an impact gun with the deck screws to screw it in. So being a little bit nimble is beneficial there. With that said, we're also going to need people down at the bottom pulling and holding, and so not everyone has to jump up onto ladders. The last project, and it's a little last minute, but Akiva's platform that you see from time to time is disintegrating underneath him, and I would like to replace that for him. So we've got a pile of cedar over there, and we just need to have maybe 2 people work on taking those wild edge live boards with the rot and stuff in them and knocking out the usable lumber, and we can demolish Akiva's platform and see about creating him a new one, which would be a fun little project. Where the screws are? Go about 4 inches that way.
Right here?
Sure.
Okay.
Pluck it.
Wow!
That's what a chuck line does.
Wow!
Yeah, it'll bring it on. There.
Is that Akiva's bed?
Yep.
Or is it-
So open up the bale, and a bunch of the bale goes in the back corner, but most of the bale just gets piled up. Break it all up and make it nice and fluffy in there for him. And then you can just spread that around in the very back.
Okay.
One. You did 3 wraps together. Alright. Yep. Well, I got a screw, but I got no screw gun. I need a screw and a gun. Alright. One day.
That's gonna be pretty good.
And then maybe I can get one later.
See, I think if we do a piece on the boat like this,
20 minutes.
Hey Akiva, you're on TV. You're on TV, why don't you act? Nah, not going for it.
Believe it or not, it's not going to be too far in the future until Arabella needs her rig. So this winter, we want to start working on her standing rigging and the sails. The sails are pretty obvious what those are, and the standing rigging is what holds up the spars. So as Akin specs it, it's galvanized wire, and the 3 shrouds here that help support the mast, those are part of her standing rigging. And the rig can kind of be broken down into 4 sections. We have the sails, we've got the standing rigging, which holds up the spars for the most part. We've got the running rigging, which for the most part controls the sails. And then we have the spars themselves. So I think we're going to work on the spars this coming summer, but this winter it would be a great time when it's cold here to go spend some time in a rigging loft working on the standing rigging and to work on in a sail loft on the sails.
Ned's been here.
That's no surprise.
The The first visit today is to R&W Rope in New Bedford, Mass. They serve just about every industry you can think of, from tall ships to small boats, and from rock climbers and rescue squads to dog leashes and decoration.
Oh no, the jewelry department.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. Boy, oh boy. Oh, those are really nice in the hand. Holy cannoli. Look at this tiny, teeny, tiny stay set.
So,
All right,
where are we going with this?
what's the goal today?
Well, we talked a number of years ago now. So the goal is, there's the plans as Akin had drawn them for the
Yeah.
gaff rig. And obviously we're not going to go with cotton sails and all of that jazz from the 1950s. So really what we're interested in is what your guys' recommendation would be for bringing the rig up to more modern times, any modifications that we should make to it. The only spars that are done are the mizzen mast, so things can be...
How about the hardware,
moved.
the bronze work, or whatever metal work you're having on the top of the mast?
So some we have from Victoria that we salvaged. So she was built in 1926-27 and just like totally encrusted with bronze. And we got her main shaved down to the mizzen. So we've got gaff jaws from her and some other hardware. And then some stuff we're either going to have to buy or fabricate because we don't have enough for both rigs because she was a cutter. These are Victoria's gaff jaws. These are beautiful. So the beads here, this is all leathered. So that's what slides up and down the mast. We will definitely reuse this. Unfortunately, we only have one because Victoria was a cutter and Arabella is a catch. So we will have to buy one, make one, do wooden ones. Not really sure.
Usually with jaws, you're gonna put some sort of chafe gear on there.
Yeah.
With the new generation wood and all of that, I prefer, instead of seeing holes put in with copper where rot can affect, you can fiberglass that before you varnish it.
Okay.
And it will disappear more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in the areas where you're reefing. Maintenance is down. Longevity of the mast is up.
Yeah.
One of the strongest recommendations made by Bob and Joe was to modify Atkins' design for the club-footed staysail boom. This sail up forward is your jib, and this one here is the staysail, and this is the staysail boom. So some staysails don't have any boom, and those would be loose-footed, which would be as like your jib. Some staysails have a boom that isn't connected to anything, it's just on the bottom of the sail like this. And this is a club-footed staysail. And some, this staysail boom here extends and is fixed onto a pedestal on the stem of the boat. And I'm not exactly sure what that would be called. But those are a couple of the ways that you can set up the staysail. So Akin has this drawn as a club-footed. We could do it as a loose-footed, or we could extend that and fix it onto a pedestal.
Don't get me wrong, I think of a staysail boom as good, but they call these clubs for a reason.
Okay.
You can get beat to hell with them.
Okay.
And there's no way to control them, dropping them or lowering. They always beat up everything when you're raising or lowering the sail. So you can make a full-length club that goes to a pedestal.
Okay.
It does the same job, but a lot safer, and you can have a topping lift on it.
Okay. So that forward end then would go to a
All the way
pedestal.
to wherever you
Gotcha.
decide. It doesn't have to go, it can go up to a foot or so aft of the staysail stay. And these are only recommendations. You
Yeah.
can do whatever you want.
You're doing ocean voyaging and going to remote places, so you need a kind of vessel that's going to stand up, to those kind of long-term endurance.
Absolutely.
That's why boats like Pride of Baltimore has the kind of,
elements she has in her rig, versus, the main schooners that are day sailing for 4 or 5 hours. It's a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
the same thing. So you can't get into a conversation with somebody whose only experience is, just doing day sailing, and try to put that mentality. It doesn't mean they don't have good advice sometimes. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
this is what's driving the decisions.
Yeah.
What is the boat doing long term? And so going with Acorn versus Oceanus or another cotton imitation, may not be the best smart
No,
thing.
no,
Acorn is
want
probably
this-
the better thing to do.
The sails that are going to be
Yeah.
like people say like, oh, it's not that nice to look at. Well, I don't care about that, honestly. Like if
Yeah,
it
yeah.
lasts longer and it functions better, that's
Yeah.
I don't
When
care
I'm
how ugly
sailing
it is.
well, I don't think about what the boat looks like.
No.
I mean, you can do a dance between as long as the functionality is the primary.
Yeah. And then, do you have any recommendations for the running rigging? I know we've talked about the stainless and stuff for the standing. But.
Well, as Joe said, just going with the double braids is probably the way to go,
Yeah.
for what you're going to be doing and stay away from the 3-strand. So, if you want to stay looking traditional, New England Ropes makes a polyester double braid that is vintage in color. So that's
Okay.
this here. So it's all the modern features
Yeah.
of a double braid. It's just that it has a vintage look to it. And again, if that's not, it doesn't bother you, then there's other alternatives. So
I've worked a lot with New England Ropes, not their marine stuff, but
yeah,
they've,
they're climbing ropes.
climb a
and
lot
things
with
like-
their
yeah, and
climbing
that's
lines.
all
Yeah.
back here. We carry a whole lot of sterling in New England, climbing, static,
Yeah.
and dynamic loaded ropes for the arborists and rescue teams, police, fire, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a function of what is the rope going to do on the boat, what kind of line you need in order to do that. This is all polyester double braid by Nova Braid from Nova Scotia. And so they're a competitor to New England. So back here you got the New England stay set. There are cases where, Steve, there may be appropriate, especially on things like quarter lifts, where you're not going to want stretch and you're going to want strength.
Yeah.
And so that's where you can get into lines like Endure Braid. So this is a classic looking line, but it actually has a Dyneema core.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So you got the strength in the Dyneema, but you've got the classic look and the softness of a polyester cover.
And I assume you can actually tie knots in that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
And
that's one thing my experience with Dyneema and Spectra is it's slick as snot on a glass door handle.
Yeah, you can tie knots in it, but it is spliced differently.
Okay.
It's what they call a core-to-core splice.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you can't splice it like a regular double braid.
Yeah.
So that would take some learning to do if you're going to do it in the field, if you will.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's different levels of strength and reduction of elongation. VPC is another one where, again, it's got a polyester cover, but it's got a blended core of Vectran and MFP.
Okay.
So this is like a moderately priced high-tech line, where the Endure Braid is going to be the highest, one of the higher expenses line. So Marlowe makes, again, a lot of high-tech lines. So like Spartan, the New York 40 that you see pictures of, we did all her rig, all her running rigging, and so she's got a lot of that high-tech line, but it's all traditional looking.
Gotcha.
Most of it's Marlowe and some Endure Braid.
Yeah, it's kind of a bewildering amount of variety and options.
Yeah.
There will certainly be more from R&W going forward, especially once the mainmast gets built next summer. The next stop was in Essex, Massachusetts to meet with Harold Burnham, an 11th generation master boat builder and sailmaker.
You can ask 1,000 people questions, and with wooden boats, you'll get 1,000 opinions. And the thing you want to look at is who's got the most actual experience on like boats, and who's been around it watching it, and there's a million armchair wooden boat guys out there.
Really?
And no matter how emphatic they are, it's a good idea to really look at who's actually done it, and what they've done and what they've observed. I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
Why not?
I'll tell you the way I do it.
Okay.
And that, I hope you wouldn't imply that to mean that that's the right way. I mean, it's just, there's so many ways to build sails and build rigs, and there are people who spend their whole lives building sails and rigs, and I'm a boat builder. That's what I do, is I build boats, and being somebody who didn't have a lot of money, I built the sails, and I enjoy the whole learning aspect of building sails and rigging and all that, and building everything. I enjoy learning about stuff, and I developed. My dad was a hobbyist, so he was not afraid of anything on a boat, and he would, more time he spent doing stuff, or learning it, then the more fun he had. So he got more for his money just by the fun he had learning it. When you're learning to make sails, I can guide you through it and you won't have any trouble. But the worst thing that can happen is you have to throw a set away. And
make them into bags and awnings.
Yeah, or but most of the time you can get yourself out of it.
Acorn doesn't have winches anywhere on the boat, so everything on this sail plan is done by human power and mechanical advantage. So there's quite a few blocks on the boat, so that you can get some mechanical advantage on the lines. One thing that we could do is add some winches either by the masts or by the cockpit. Lead things maybe a little differently, but we could, for instance, take out these blocks on the jib and control those via a winch, which would be one way to kind of modernize this rig a little bit.
I think what you'll find is by the time you need a winch on that 166-foot jib, that you'll be time to take it down.
Yeah. Also, speaking of the size of that jib, though, I think that Steve's plan is to go up to Maine, in which case he could get away with something lighter and bigger as a jib. You know what I mean? Because that Yankee's nice offshore and stuff, but maybe in lighter winds, 10 to 15 and stuff. Do you think he would want just 100% Genoa or something like that instead of the Yankee? Because he's going to have a furler. So if you had to pick like one sail...
Oh, you're going to have a roller furling on it?
I think we'll put a roller furler out on the jib, yeah. That way we don't have to go out on the bowsprit to mess with it.
Well, that's where I am not as... I'd have to get somebody else to help you with that, because
with the jib. Okay.
Yeah, I hate roller furling. I absolutely despise it. If you look at a boat that's on a mooring, half the time the ones that park their moorings, it's because their jib unrolled, and there's been a few friendship sloops that have had. Many other friendship sloops have the roller furling jibs, and if you're going to go with the roller furling, I would say go with a modern, completely modern head stay, and an aluminum track that runs all the way up the sail, and then I still hate it, because I just think I've seen more of those things unwind, and if you're not going to spend the money to really do that jib right, it's gonna unwind. And I thought you were a freaking mountain climber. Why are you afraid to go out on that bowsprit? What's the matter with you? I've seen pictures of you riding trees down and things like that. You're afraid to go out there? I mean, I think
afraid is maybe the wrong word.
I'm an old guy, and I've get out on my bowsprit and yank the sail down. I'm not a mountain climber. If you're really worried about it, clip yourself in. Get out there and get that thing down. And the big thing is if it's rough enough to make you nervous about being out there, you should have had it down long ago. Tie it up good. It'll be fine. Yeah. Really. And set it up to tie down, put your tie downs on it.
Yeah, I think ditching the wood stove and adding a roller furler are probably the two most common recommendations that we've received.
A wood stove on a boat?
I know. Yeah, lots of people are up in arms about the wood stove on the boat.
Why?
Well, it's a wooden boat. You put a wood stove in it. Seems like a bad idea, they say.
What's bad about it?
Well, you got to carry wood to burn, and
Well,
you
that's
burn the
a pain in
boat
the ass,
down, and people are all worried about it. But we had a great little shipmate to go on.
I have a shipmate in my boat. I have a couple of shipmates. The wood stove is they're fantastic. There's nothing like it for heat. If you have a shipmate, then it'll also burn coal.
Yeah.
And the coal is very, very nice. And a lot of people swear by coal.
And available everywhere. I mean, I know wood's available everywhere, but
Coal is yeah. But the other thing that's a diesel stove is nice too.
Got one of those as well.
Yeah. God, you got a lot of gear. And what I would suggest is get this thing in the water and get some experience, and then you can make up your own mind on how you change. That shed there is oak downstairs and pine upstairs, and that's just a drying shed. And this is our 1942 International truck, which was originally a military vehicle built for beach landings in the Pacific. And back in 2004, a friend of mine told me I had to have this truck, and I went up and looked at it and said, well, I guess if I have to have it, then I have to have it. And I put in a bid for the Cumberland Fire Department to buy it. And I bought it. And then I had to get it down, and I discovered that you didn't have to get a sticker for 10 days if you register a new car in Massachusetts. So I registered it in and drove it down from Maine.
Wow. That must have been a ride.
It was quite a ride. It was. I had to be very cautious. It almost had brakes, and and this is our mechanical electrical shed, and there's enough engines in here we can barely get in the door, but I was in the process of cleaning that when you guys got here, so that'll get cleaned up. And this is our bandsaw right here. That bandsaw was bought by John Prince Story back in the late 30s and set up there. I had to raise it 14 inches because the tide kept coming in.
Oh, right.
And but it was there. He built 14 draggers with it, and he and his grandson Jonathan, and then they went out of business, and they took the saw somewhere, and my father got it back, and it was missing the top wheel, and he found the top wheel down in the bottom of the creek. How he knew it was there, I have no idea.
Harold makes sails exclusively in Oceanus sailcloth, which has a traditional look and feel with modern strength and durability. Steve will probably end up making the sails from Dacron for reasons that will be expounded on later, but they went through a few drawings and talked it over before finishing it up out in the yard where a few old boats are settling into the creek.
And this is the Savannah Beale, which has been there for just a little over a year. And she's now conformed so that she's shaped like the bottom of the creek. But she's 100 and 20-something years old, so.
Well, we'll be the shape of the
15
creek
years
at that
old,
age
so,
as well.
Yeah, yeah. And, but we're getting ready to completely rehabilitate the Beale. We're going to basically haul her up and completely replace everything.
And she's an important boat because...
well, she's an important boat for many different people for many different reasons, but she's one of only 2, I believe, fishing schooners left that were built in the state of Maine. And she was still running, I think, as late as 2013, so over 100 years of commercial service. And if you can be in commercial service for 100 years, you've earned sort of a special place in the world of wooden boats. There's not too many. A wooden boat that lasts 50 years is remarkable. A wooden boat that lasts 100 years is outstanding.
Big thank you to Harold and R&W for taking the time to talk with us about the rig and the sails and go over some options with us. And here are 2 resources that Harold and R&W recommended. So one is the Complete Rigger's Apprentice and one is the Sailmaker's Apprentice. So these have been sitting on the shelf for a little while and I've flipped through them, but I haven't dove into them too much. So I think when I am done reading all those electrical books, these 2 are probably going to be next on the list so that we can be prepared to go further into the sailmaking and the rigging.